Lakes are made when water collects in basins on the land. The basins are created by the forces that shape the Earth's crust: pressure and fire, ice and storms, forces that have been at work for billions of years. The lakes themselves are geologically short-lived. They are born, they fluctuate, and they die according to the effects of geological time and events. And their life-giving waters are essential to environments that vanish when the waters disappear, leaving only telltale traces behind. Some of the oldest lakes in North America are found in the Great Basin of the United States, a region whose rivers have no outlet to any sea. Between 10 and 100,000 years ago, heavy rains of the Pleistocene era filled more than 100 depressions throughout the basin, creating giant lakes. These lakes became shallower and wider as silt loaded with alkali salts washed down from the surrounding mountains. A drier climate of recent years has caused most of the water to evaporate. What is left behind carries a steadily increasing burden of minerals and salinity. Gradual slopes of sand left from eons of grinding water underlie Utah's Great Salt Lake, a remnant of the basin's ancient Lake Bonneville. Its surface area fluctuates with the years and the seasons, but there is no doubt that the lake is slowly disappearing. Next to the Dead Sea, this is the saltiest body of water on Earth, with a salinity 7 times that of the oceans. But the lake is not entirely dead. The wind piles waterfly larvae high along the shoreline, attracting bird life. The birds also feed on the lake's population of tiny brine shrimp. Pyramid Lake in Nevada is named for one of the tufa structures that dot the surface of the lake. Tufa is a rock-like material made of calcium carbonate, created by algae beneath the water. Or it can be built up where precipitates from underwater hot springs emerge into the lake's cooler temperatures. The presence of tufa above the surface shows that water levels were once much higher. So do the terraces made by wave action along the lake's northern shore. In May and June, the quiet shimmering air is often stirred by a rise of nesting white pelicans, a startling sight on a lake at the edge of the great American desert. Seated beneath the eastern escarpment of the Sierra Nevada, Mono Lake is a remnant of the basin's pluvial Lake Russell. It seems that nothing has changed here since 1862, when Mark Twain stopped to observe this solemn, silent, sailless sea, this lonely tenant of the loneliest spot on Earth. But today, its source streams are being diverted for agriculture, and the water is rapidly dropping away from Mono's shorelines. Farther down this same valley, Owens Lake is dry now, after supplying the last of its waters for the development of Los Angeles and the San Joaquin Valley. Centuries ago, it covered 200 square miles and was 200 feet deep. Increased rainfall at the northern edge of the Great Basin country creates fresh marshy lakes where seed grasses and aquatic plants thrive in the shallow waters. On the California-Oregon border, Tule and Klamath lakes support migrating water birds that move along the Pacific Flyway. In the early spring, these waters, which are now included in the National Wildlife Refuge System, hum with the largest annual concentration of waterfowl in the world. While rains were filling the basin lakes, one half of the continent was covered by glaciers. For thousands of years, these masses of ice scarred and scoured the land, digging basins into the rock. As a result, there are more glacial lakes in North America than all other types combined. When the weight of the ice was lifted, the land rose up in steps and elevated the multi-leveled bowls of the Great Lakes. All of the Great Lakes, with the exception of Michigan, border both the United States and Canada. A lake that deserves its impressive title, Superior, is the largest fresh body of water on Earth. The names of Lakes Huron, Erie, Michigan, and Ontario recall the Indian people who were the first to settle along these waters. The northern beaches are often made of gravel and boulders brought south by ice movements across the Canadian Shield. On the southern shores, sand from glacial drift forms strand beaches along calm bays of clear water. Beneath this land, deep salt deposits indicate that the entire region was once an arm of the Atlantic, before the land rebounded from its heavy mantle of ice. Today, a ship can travel 2,000 miles of lake water, locks, and canals along this inland waterway. From Duluth, on the western shore of Lake Superior, to the Atlantic Ocean, this is one of the most valuable shipping lanes in the world. Another force was working to build the land at the same time glaciers were holding and wearing it down. Oregon's Crater Lake was born 7,000 years ago with the explosion of Mount Mazama, a giant volcano in the Cascade Range. Superheated gases blew off the cone's top, and magma, ash, and pumice flew out of its crater until the mountain cooled and collapsed into itself, forming a nearly circular caldera. Rain and snowmelt slowly filled the caldera with nearly 2,000 feet of intensely blue water, making it the world's seventh deepest lake. Lakes are often created by combined forces. Lake Tahoe on the Nevada-California border began as a cleft in a group of fault block mountains. Later, a volcanic flow of andesite hardened into a dike across the valley's only outlet, trapping runoff inside. During the ice ages, the valley was scoured by glaciers that left their waters in retreat, waters that range from emerald green to cobalt blue. Tahoe is 1,650 feet deep, one of the deepest and the most beautiful alpine lakes to be seen anywhere. While the lakes we have mentioned are generally thousands of years old, others are more recent and temporary, sometimes more temporary than man would suppose. Lake Powell lies between Utah and Arizona and occupies what was once the Glen Canyon of the Colorado River. The canyon was flooded behind one of a series of dams until the water was brought to the level of the plateaus that scatter the region. The purpose of the dam and the lake was to conserve water for agriculture and hydroelectric power, as well as to help control flooding along the Colorado. Increased surface area means more evaporation, and each year much of the water is lost to the desert air. More seeps into the soft sandstones, shales, and clays that line the canyon sides and bottom. These materials, sandwiched between harder rock, become aquifers, which hold most of the groundwater that makes up what we call water tables. This water is carried downhill through the porous layers of the aquifer with the help of gravity, and will frequently emerge miles away in seeps or springs. While Lake Powell is useful now, in a few centuries at best, silt dropped by the slowed waters will fill the canyon, and the lake will disappear. The Salton Sea is the result of silting at what used to be the delta of the Colorado. Once part of the Gulf of California, it was cut off by deposits centuries ago. Its waters gradually evaporated, uncovering the rich farmlands of the Imperial Valley, some 200 feet below sea level. In 1905, an irrigation canal from the river into the valley eroded and became the river's new course. By the time it was blocked 2 years later, the Salton Sea again covered 400 square miles and was 60 feet deep. This reborn lake is a haven for bird life, where stilts, coots, and snowy egrets feed at the shoreline. Today, the lake has been stabilized. Evaporation matches the return of irrigation waters to the basin. But the Salton Sea's position below sea level makes it a natural place for an even larger lake to reoccur. The Mississippi Delta and the tip of Florida hold two distinctly southern lakes. Lake Pontchartrain, next to New Orleans, stands at sea level and could be called a bay. It opens into the Gulf of Mexico. But because its headwaters drain a region of heavy rains, Pontchartrain still remains relatively fresh. Lake Okeechobee in southern Florida covers 700 square miles. Okeechobee is seminal for big water. The lake, held in a shallow limestone bowl, averages less than 15 feet in depth. In the past, Okeechobee has reacted violently during hurricanes. Its floods have caused extensive damage and loss of life during the last century.
Key Largo's dry tortugas, including the Florida Straits and Florida Bay.
Locks, levees, dams, and canals now control the water and channel it for irrigation of the surrounding land. But Okeechobee's natural overflows once replenished and flushed the nearby Everglades. Today, these wetlands are drying out at an alarming rate that threatens many species of life. And man's overchanneling and overuse have affected the water table under the region. Because it has been lowered, the huge limestone Florida aquifer is being polluted by seepage from the ocean, and the available supply of fresh water for people and wildlife has been diminished. From this standoff between man and nature, as in so many others evolving around the world's lakes and water sources, we are beginning to learn how fragile and how important to all life our water resources are. Lakes form an important link in the Earth's water cycle. Because they are storehouses for water and energy, we will continue our attempts to control them, and we will continue to live on their shores. Now, we will have to learn to protect them from pollution and depletion, and a variety of human powers and errors, until we can live in a better balance with the world around us.